hosting our MS in Climate virtual information session. My name is Alfred Ayub. I work here in admissions at Columbia Climate School. My colleague Damaris Diaz is also assisting with the event. She's the master and commander of our Q&A. So when you're typically getting a response, you're getting it from Damaris in the Q&A chat. But again, welcome everybody. Our session is going to be action-packed. We are going to first introduce you to Columbia Climate School and really dive deep into the new MS in Climate program. We're welcoming our first cohort in fall 2025. And then the second half of this session is going to be reserved for a faculty panel, specifically the directors of each of the advanced certificate programs that will shed a little bit more light on these certificates and their backgrounds and what makes the climate school such a compelling choice for your graduate journey. So one thing I like to do is just make sure my audio is coming in loud and clear. So it's a fun exercise just to see how diverse and dynamic our learning community is. If you would use the Q&A, forgive me, to type in where you are joining us from. So city, state, country, we love to see that data as it rolls in. And again, you will use the Q&A function because the chat's currently disabled. Auburn, Alabama. Oh, Thomas, excellent. Welcome. New York, New York. Excellent. Welcome, welcome, Rachel. Munich, Germany. Balboa, Spain. Bradford, we just linked on LinkedIn. Welcome. Nashville, Brooklyn, Mississippi, Philly, Ithaca. Welcome, Zach. Zach goes. Zach's coming on a campus tour next week, so that's great. We have South Korea, Silver Spring, Maryland, Chicago, New York City. New York City is well represented. Houston, Texas. Mariana in Brazil, welcome. Indonesia. Wow, you are staying up nice and late for this. I so do appreciate it. Nepal. Excellent. All right, well, welcome everybody again to today's MS in Climate virtual info session. Today, we are going to go ahead and perform a kind of a broad overview on specifically Columbia Climate School. And then we're going to touch on the student profile, so who learns within Columbia Climate School's graduate learning community. We'll discuss the MS in Climate curriculum and also highlight the advanced certificate opportunities embedded within the curriculum. And then we will conclude with professional development, financial aid, and my favorite part, the ever so riveting and exciting application process. And then finally, the faculty panel will be taking up the second half of today's session. As questions come in, feel free to type those questions in. I really want to encourage you, not every one of our sessions include faculty. So if you do have questions, I always encourage really with a faculty lens, definitely ask them. Now is the time to ask questions of our faculty. This is a great opportunity. I'd like to welcome our faculty panel to today's session. First is Radley Horton. Radley is a professor at Columbia University's Climate School. His research focuses on climate extremes, tail risks, climate impacts, and adaptation. Professor Horton was a convening lead author for the third National Climate Assessment. He currently is the principal investigator for the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Climate Adaptation Partnerships funded consortium for climate risk in the urban Northeast. He's also the Columbia University lead for the NSF-funded Megalopolitan, Coastal Transformation Hub, and the Department of Interior-funded Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. Radley has served on numerous national and international task forces and committees, including the Climate Scenario Task Force in support of the 2018 National Climate Assessment, and he often appears on national and international television, radio, and print. Radley also teaches graduate courses on climate risk assessment and is the director of the Climate Systems and Analytics Advanced Certificate. Next up, we have Jessica Fanzo, Professor Climate and Director of the Food for Humanity Initiative at Columbia Climate School. I should also note Professor Fanzo and her research team just recently launched a phenomenal podcast. I highly recommend subscribing and listening in. It is really definitely illuminating. Professor Fanzo's transdisciplinary research discerns and analyzes the connection between climate change and food systems in nutrition and climate-vulnerable communities living in resource-constrained settings to identify and explore opportunities within food systems to enhance diet, nutrition, and environmental outcomes. She was the first laureate of the Carrasco's Foundation Sustainable Diets Prize in 2012 for her research on sustainable food and diets for long-term human health. And then she was also elected into the National Academy of Sciences in 2024. And then finally, last but certainly not least, is Jeffrey Schlegelmilch, who is Associate Professor of Professional Practice and Director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness here at Columbia Climate School, where he is also the Director of Executive Education for non-degree programs. And I definitely, for those of you that are joining us that might be interested in a non-degree option, definitely check those out. We have some really interesting professional learning opportunities that are short and offered in online or hybrid formats. So definitely check out the non-degree options as well. His areas of expertise include public health preparedness, community resilience, and the integration of private and public sector capabilities. In addition to his work at Columbia, he also serves as an advisor to private sector organizations on topics related to grid resilience, planning, and advises leaders on preparedness systems and policy at all levels of government. He's an opinion contributor with The Hill and is frequently called upon as an expert for numerous media outlets. In fact, I saw that most recent article that was co-published on The Hill with Amy Campbell, one of our current students. So congrats, Jeff, on that. And now let's go ahead and I'm going to first introduce you. We're going to get back to our faculty panelists shortly, but we're first going to talk a little bit more about Columbia Climate School. So, and Columbia University writ large. So when we say Columbia University, let's back it up a little. We're referencing a major research institution. In fact, it's the oldest university in the state of New York, the fifth oldest here in the United States, and it's considered a blueprint for many research institutions here in the US. And when you say Columbia University, you're referring to an institution with over 20 different schools that fall underneath that umbrella term. The majority of those schools being graduate professional schools. You can think of Columbia Business School, Columbia School of Social Work, the oldest school of social work in the country, the School of Journalism that administers the Pulitzer Prize each year, the Mailman School of Public Health, Columbia Law School, the list goes on. The newest professional school introduced here at Columbia Climate School, at Columbia University is the Climate School. It was announced in 2020 and formally launched in 2021. And our ethos is that the world requires knowledgeable leaders to work with businesses, communities, governments, and civil society to address the climate crisis. Columbia Climate School's graduate degree programs and other learning opportunities provide an interdisciplinary knowledge base for climate leaders with diverse interests and backgrounds. And I truly want to lean into the idea of an interdisciplinary approach. We have to take that approach as a climate school, especially being embedded in a phenomenal research institution like Columbia University. And you'll see that interdisciplinary nature, it's going to distill through not only our faculty talent, who three of the faculty joining today have very different kind of backgrounds, all embedded within Columbia Climate School, but also in our students and learning community in terms of their academic backgrounds and ultimate goals. You'll see on this slide, there are 3 photographs here, and that's because Columbia Climate School at the university has a rather unique footprint. So we are a new school, again, formally launched in 2021, but that doesn't mean that our footprint was launched in 2021. Interestingly, we were developed out of both Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory and what was the Earth Institute, the largest research center here at Columbia University. In terms of Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, that's photographed in the lower left-hand corner. There's over 300 PhD level researchers based at Lamont focused on earth and environmental sciences. It has a storied history in the climate space. In fact, the first academic research paper to reference global warming, that term, in fact, was coined by a Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory professor in the 1970s. And that's located about 45 minutes north of our Morningside Heights campus. We have free shuttle buses that go there every hour, and many of our students perform research up at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. And it's a beautiful campus, and if you're looking to kind of escape the hustle bustle of New York City, Lamont is a great place to be. The second photograph in the middle is Morningside Heights. That's the classic main campus at Columbia University. One of our buildings, which is Hogan Hall, that's where our dean sits, along with some of our faculty and many other administrative offices. They're located on the Morningside Heights campus. And then finally, the Forum building is on the new Manhattanville campus, which is at 125th and Broadway. And this building is, and this campus is where many of the academic affairs staff sit, and many of our faculty have offices there as well. So we have a unique kind of three campus footprint, if you will, at Columbia Climate School. I'll now discuss the student profile of the current students learning at the climate school. And when I reference the current learning community, I'm referencing our graduate student population that is the MA in Climate and Society program. Again, today's focus is the MS in Climate program, but we don't have any MS in Climate students yet as we're launching in fall 25. So I want to highlight specifically the MA, the current learning community, which is the MA Climate and Society, and you'll be taking many core courses with this learning community. So I think there's a lot to kind of understand here. In terms of the student profile, we currently have 44% international students. They represent 27 countries across the world. And then among our domestic students, we currently have 18 states of representation. And another figure that we're extremely proud of is approximately 17% of the students that we enrolled in fall 2024 are the first in their family to attend college. They're classified as first-generation college students. And then finally, the average age in the most recent learning community that we enrolled is 26 years old. I want to highlight the pie chart on the lower right corner, specifically the undergraduate degrees with which students enrolling in our program are coming from. So interestingly, about 2/3 of the students that enroll in Columbia Climate School have social science degrees, and about 1/3 come to the program with more classic STEM degree backgrounds. We do anticipate a higher ratio of STEM degree backgrounds for the MS in Climate program, but I do want to strongly encourage all students from all disciplines, if you feel the MS in Climate program is a better fit, you should move forward with an application to that program. And we'll talk about that in the application process. But the students that enroll in Columbia Climate School, their desires and interests are extremely different from one another. Some of the students are coming to the program with a real interest in carbon management, carbon capture technology. Other students are sitting in the program really interested in climate policy. Other students in the program might be interested in climate finance or sustainability consulting. The through line for all of our students is going to be the idea of a climate core. So now let's touch on the MS in Climate program. The MS in Climate is a 2-year, 50 credit hour professional degree that gives graduates from diverse backgrounds an in-depth training in specific areas of climate expertise and prepares them to be climate leaders at community, state, national, and international levels. In terms of this 2-year program, you're looking at a program that's really 4 semesters in length. You'll say, well, Alfred, there's actually 5 semesters listed there. Interestingly, the summer semester, so the semester between your first and second year, that summer internship, that's a non-credit summer semester. So I just want to note that this is truly, in terms of tuition, a 4-semester program. You will begin the program in the fall, where you're largely focusing on the climate core, along with an applied climate course. In the spring, you'll continue with the climate core. You'll start taking elective courses, and you'll also begin diving into your certificate requirements, the advanced certificate. Your second fall semester, you'll be wrapping up your climate core. You'll also be continuing your electives and, of course, your certificate. And then the spring semester is largely continuing elective certificates and then the capstone workshop. I want to note that there's a great deal of applied learning in the MS in Climate program. Not only are students in this program pursuing an internship between their year 1 and 2, but you also will be working with a live capstone project in kind of a consulting capacity, where it's driven by a group exercise, and it's organizations that are coming to Columbia Climate School with real issues. And in fact, if I can ask my colleague Damaris Diaz if we could plug in the capstone workshop website that's specifically for the MA Climate and Society, but it gives you an idea of the type of clients MS in climate students can also anticipate working with, along with the video presentations of our students' work as well. In terms of the climate core, again, this is a through line. It's a signature of a Columbia Climate School degree. The idea of the climate core is regardless of industry or sector that you're hoping to work in, that you all have this foundation knowledge in the climate space. So within the climate core, we have dynamics of climate variability and change. This is largely a physics class. This course is going to teach you the science behind the climate crisis. This course is going to give you the answers. If somebody stops you on the street and says, do you believe in climate change? And your response is yes. And then they ask you why, you will be able to communicate the why. We then have the two pillars in addressing climate change. That's climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. You'll get exposed to both in the climate core. And then a new addition within the climate core, and this course was taught as an elective for several years, but we're really excited to be launching this as a climate core course, is climate justice theory, practice, and policy. As we know, communities and different communities are impacted by the climate crisis at different rates. And so we have to have climate justice as a lens if we are going to be working in the climate space. And then finally, climate core students, or forgive me, climate MS and climate students in particular, are going to have a quantitative methods course. Now, interestingly, it's going to be two courses. And the first course is going to be a course that is specifically using R. So you're going to be looking at large climate data sets, being able to manipulate the data, make decisions based off of the data, tell a story with the data. This is all critical in your first quantitative methods course. And then your second quantitative methods course will be driven by the advanced certificate with which you choose or select. So for example, those of you that select climate systems and analytics as your advanced certificate, your second quantitative core course will be a course in Python. Food systems and disaster management will have a couple other options for quantitative methods, although you could pursue Python as well. But just to give you a little bit of nuance on the climate core. In terms of the summer internship, again, this is a non-credit internship that you can perform at nonprofit, private, public, or research sectors. These are examples of students that have performed internships at Columbia Climate School. Now, you might be saying, well, hold on, Alfred, you referenced that the MS in Climate program is new. It is, but we have a longstanding history of climate and society students performing internships. So we've had students at the New York Mayor's office. We've had students at the Center for Climate Systems and Research, at the USDA Climate Hub, and a variety of other areas where internships are performed. Again, Damaris Diaz highlighted the capstone workshops, but I think this is the ultimate transforming concepts into practice, where you are working with an organization and addressing a specific issue or question that they have that they would like further explored. This is just a few of the examples that I'm highlighting here, like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change or the United Nations Foundation on Climate Environment Program. My personal favorite as a Tampa Bay area native is we partnered, I think it's been 2 years now, with WFLA-TV, which is the NBC affiliate in Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. And WFLA-TV specifically wanted to assess the Tampa Bay area's vulnerability compared to other cities along the West Coast and glean an explanation for the city's vulnerability under the current climate conditions. This has been, again, for my own personal story, a very fascinating time as we had a very dramatic hurricane season most recently. So again, the capstone workshop is the idea of applying everything that you learn in the program with this consulting project that's group driven. We also have phenomenal climate school electives that we just keep on adding. I have to be honest, I started in March of 2022, and I think that academic year they offered 3 electives, and we have well over 20 different electives that have been offered at the climate school now. And this is just a few of them. So For example, toward climate resilience and justice, climate change law and policy, financing renewable energies, Black ecologies. Again, the list just continues to grow in terms of climate school electives. But I think a huge component of the MS in Climate program, again, it's a 50 credit hour journey. 18 of those credits are going to be made up of an advanced certificate option. And so this year we have 3 options. Now, one thing I like to note is that when you're applying to the MS in Climate program, you will share with us the advanced certificate that you are most interested in. But interestingly, you're not locking yourself into that advanced certificate if admitted to the MS in Climate program. You actually don't officially declare the advanced certificate until the end of your first semester. So I just want to highlight that. It's very possible you select, for example, climate and food systems at the time of your admissions application, and then, through various interactions with Jeff Schlegelmilch, all of a sudden you say, you know what, climate and disaster management is the better fit for me. You could potentially then transition to climate and disaster management for your advanced certificate at the end of that first semester. So again, there's a little bit of wiggle room there. But right now we offer climate systems and analytics, which provides the critical skills and understandings to interpret and analyze climate and weather data, understand climate model predictions and projections, assess climate-related risks to human and natural systems, and develop strategies for mitigating these effects. Next up, we have climate and disaster management, which provides students with the foundational knowledge and skills needed to conduct and apply research in various intersecting disciplines relevant to managing disasters. Students will gain new insights into disaster management, particularly in relation to preparedness, response, recovery, and long-term resiliency. And then finally, climate and food systems, which focuses on the intersection of climate with food systems, food production, and human livelihood. Students learn how to apply evidence-based approaches to food systems transformation, gaining critical skills and knowledge for professional pathways in this emerging field. In terms of just giving you, again, think of this as an amuse-bouche of the curriculum. So for climate systems and analytics, the 18 credit hours, you have 12 credits of required core courses. Okay, so 12 credits of required core courses, 4 courses that every climate systems and analytics students will take. They include climate modeling, GIS for climate applications, climate risk impacts and adaptation, and then computing and research methods for climate data science. And then you have selective courses. So 6 credit hours of additional courses, typically 2 courses, that you are going to be completing to wrap up that climate systems and analytics degree. What I like to highlight, some of those courses can be at the climate school, and then we have some courses that we are offering as an ability to cross-register. Again, the idea and the nature of Columbia Climate School is we're interdisciplinary. We have to be. And so, for example, as a climate systems and analytics student, you can cross-register at the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. Perhaps you're interested in their environmental data analysis and modeling course, or at the School of Professional Studies, Climate Science for Decision Makers, Modeling, Analytics, and Applications, or even at the Graduate School of Arts and Sciences. So we have a list of selective courses you can also choose from to cross-register and to wrap up that certificate. For disaster management, again, you have those 12 credits of required courses. They include climate change and disaster management, post-disaster recovery, a focus on housing and economic sectors, building equitable community partnerships in disaster management, applied disaster management research methods, and again, that selective option where you could potentially cross-register to take additional or to wrap up that advanced certificate. And examples of cross-registration include sustainability in the face of natural disasters at the School of Professional Studies, also disaster philanthropy, among other electives at the climate school. And then finally, for climate and food systems, you have those 12 credits of required courses. They include food systems and climate interactions, food equity, ethics and politics, global food trade and climate-related food system shocks, and then finally methods for food systems analysis. And then for the selectives, some of those courses highlighted include, hey, Mailman School of Public Health is on the menu potentially. So food security, plant biology, climate change, and public health could be a course you could take to also add to the Food Systems Advanced Certificate. At the School of International and Public Affairs, there's an agricultural environmental policy course. And then at School of Professional Studies, Smart Agriculture for Changing Climate. I also want to highlight one other option that we're excited about, and let's say you're interested in the MS in climate, but you're also interested in a dual degree program. So we just recently announced a dual degree with the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. That dual degree would be an MS in climate and an MS in architecture and urban design. So within the same timeline, within the same 2-year timeline, you would complete 77 credit hours. And how that would be broken down, the 2 semesters would be in the MS in climate program, and then 3 semesters would be completed in the MS in architecture and urban design program. Interestingly, it's a two-way relationship. You could potentially start the program with the MS in climate school, or you could start the program with the MS in architecture and urban design. The example I'm giving you here is starting with the climate school. We are having an information session on April 14th. Any of you interested in climate and the built environment and might be particularly drawn in architecture and urban design, you do not have to be an architect to pursue this program. I encourage you to register for that internship. And in fact, Damaris, if we could include that in the chat box, forgive me, the info session, the January 14th info session, forgive me, definitely register for that. I do want to note, you do have to apply to both schools. So MS in Architecture and Urban Design and the MS in Climate program if you are interested in the dual degree. It requires 2 separate applications. I also want to highlight our phenomenal career resources and professional development opportunities. We have a dedicated career management office. They host a variety of employer info sessions. They also have obviously resume and cover letter reviews. They do one-on-one consulting with you. They have an alumni mentorship program that's extremely popular. They also host sustainability skill seminars every single year. They typically host around 12 of them. So if you're interested in LEED certification or sustainability consulting or climate finance, they'll have sustainability skills seminars typically hosted in the evening or on the weekends for you to attend. Every February, we have the All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Development Career Fair. It's a really exciting opportunity. In fact, one of our most recent climate school virtual sessions, the one we hosted in December, Taylor Atkinson was our alum that attended the event, and she shared that she got her job out of the All Ivy Environmental and Sustainable Career Fair. We welcome nearly 100 employers to that event, and over 900 students participate across the Ivy League. We also have an exclusive job board specifically for Columbia Climate School students. But again, it's a relatively intimate learning community. We're expecting around 140 students total in Columbia Climate School, and you have your own dedicated career management office specifically for kind of your internship journey and, of course, your eventual full-time journey. In terms of sector of employment, this is both for our graduating class of 2022 and 2023, bearing in mind we do not have a graduating class specifically for the MS in climate, but I think this still gives you some interesting insights in where our alumni go on to. About 21% of the students work in the public sector, about 31% of the students ended up going into the private sector, and then the nonprofit NGO space represented 27%. And these are just a few of examples of organizations and roles that our students have ended up pursuing: the World Bank, McKinsey, UNICEF, the City of Seattle, Boston Consulting Group, the City of Los Angeles, CBS News. We have a number of students that go into climate communication. And Damaris, if I could do one more shout out, if we could highlight the employment outcomes webpage, that would really be helpful to share in the chat as well. I also want to touch on financial aid opportunities and specifically highlight, climate school merit scholarships as well as the Dean's Graduate Scholarship. So in terms of financial aid, all of you are joining this session. What is today's date? Today's date is January 8th. I strongly encourage you to take advantage of our priority deadline, which is January 15th, 2025, because you will automatically be considered for merit-based scholarships by applying to the priority deadline. So definitely take advantage of the January 15th priority deadline. We have climate school scholarships. These range anywhere from $10,000 to upwards of $35,000. Again, no separate application. You are automatically considered for a climate school scholarship by simply applying by the priority deadline. I want to note that in terms of last year's incoming class, about 57% of the incoming class received a climate school scholarship. And again, the vast majority of those students were priority deadline candidates. So again, we encourage you to take advantage of that. If you are a veteran of the United States military and have 100% of the post 9/11 GI Bill, you may qualify for the Yellow Ribbon Program, and Columbia Climate School is also a proud member of the Yellow Ribbon Program. So we also offer that opportunity as a funding source. If any of you are joining us today are a veteran of the United States military, definitely check out the Yellow Ribbon Program opportunities. We also like to highlight external fellowships, and they're on our tuition and financial aid webpage. In fact, we even link out to other universities that have really interesting external fellowship databases. But if you are interested in external fellowships, the time is now to apply for those resources. And then finally, the most recent opportunity, and we're thrilled to announce this, we are offering a number of Dean's Graduate Scholarships specifically for the MS in Climate program. So this is only for the MS in Climate program. These Dean's Graduate Scholarships are valued at $50,000 each. There are a limited number of them, but you are automatically considered for the Dean's Graduate Scholarship if you apply by the priority deadline, which is January 15th, 2025 again. And then finally, I will say many of our students utilize federal and private loans to help fund their education. And now I'm going to quickly transition to the online application process. So in the online application, it is a holistic review. I want to reiterate that it is a holistic review. Our admissions committee is evaluating candidates in its entirety. It's not a minimum GPA or standardized test score equals up or down decision. So our admissions committee is going to be looking carefully at your resume. We require 2 letters of reference. If you attended a university within the last 5 years, one of those recommendation letters should be an academic reference. If it's been more than 5 years, you could certainly provide 2 professional letters of recommendation. We also carefully review your transcripts. The unofficial transcripts is what we review for admissions decisions. So you'll simply upload your unofficial transcripts. And actually, we hosted a very robust application tips and strategies virtual session that I strongly recommend all of you view. It's embedded on the How to Apply webpage. But Damaris, if you wouldn't mind also linking that on the chat as well, if you want to hear a little bit more about the online application process. For those of you that are international, we do ask for a TOEFL, an IELTS, or a Duolingo English test, one of those 3 English language tests. And because this program is entirely taught in English, you have to have a strong command of the English language. This is going to be a rigorous program. So we're looking for a minimum of a 100 on the TOEFL, a 7.5 on the IELTS, or a 135 on the Duolingo English test. And then finally, a statement of purpose. January 15th is our priority deadline. March 1st is our final deadline. In terms of the MS in Climate, I want to spend a little bit of time. The statement of purpose is critical. It's up to 1,000 words, and we want you to share your key experiences that have contributed to your commitment to work on climate change issues. What are your academic and professional goals, and what knowledge and skills are you hoping to develop through enrollment in the climate school? Finally, which climate core course are you most excited to complete? And then which advanced certificate are you most interested in pursuing and why? Those last 2 data points I think are very important because remember, the climate core is the signature of a Columbia Climate School education. And of course, we want to hear a little bit of a narrative around which advanced certificate, which is a robust element of the MS in Climate program. So why are you interested specifically in food systems or disaster management or climate systems analytics? And now I want to make sure we have some time for our faculty panel. So I'd like to now transition over to our faculty and we'll kick off with, I think this is an interesting question. We'll kick off with a unique question and maybe we'll start with Professor Jess Fanzo. So can you share a moment in your career that reaffirmed your commitment to studying climate and sustainability or environmental sciences, and what helps you stay hopeful about our ability to manage the climate crisis and ultimately avoid the worst predicted impacts?
Thanks, Alfred, and thanks everybody for joining. It's really nice to see such an interest in Columbia's climate school programs. I think I work on food system issues, and And climate and the environment has always been center to our work because we need the climate and sound environmental sustainability in order to produce food and ensure that that food is safe and healthy. So it's always been center in my mind. Of course, as the climate has worsened, it becomes very acute. Um, and I would say where I kind of really see that most, I've worked for a long time in the field in Africa, and you really see a lot of the African farmers at the front lines of climate change and the climate crisis, and the consistent shocks that a lot of farmers are grappling with, who are trying to put food on our tables. So to me, really seeing that firsthand and the struggles that a lot of farmers, particularly in low income countries, are facing really has solidified it. I would just say one other thing, Alfred. My parents live in North Carolina in a town called Hendersonville, which is very close to Asheville. And for some of you who know, who live in the United States, North Carolina was hit by, torrential rains and a hurricane. And Jeff knows this well because I was calling him and emailing him to get help, because my parents really struggled with that and lost their home and car. And that was just this past year. And it really, it further gave me drive and passion to work in this space. And particularly, it's nice to have both Jeff and Radley on here, because you really see how a disaster can completely shift your life, right? And my parents are old. It's hard to start over. Many communities are dealing with these extreme shocks, which Radley knows really well, and extreme weather events. So I think this past year, with the further warming of the planet, so many extreme weather events has really ignited even more passion for us to accelerate what we're doing, accelerate the science, accelerate the evidence, accelerate policy, and really get things moving. So I think this year was particularly poignant for me from a personal perspective, but it's always been centered to my work on food.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for that. And perhaps just Jeff was highlighted a little bit. Jeff, could you also share kind of your commitment to studying climate and what helps you stay hopeful?
Yeah, yeah. It's a question that I knew was coming and still didn't prepare for it. So, no, but it's a big question, right? Because it's so central to sort of what we do every day. It's hard to sort of define a specific moment, but there are certainly many, many moments. But I will say actually, maybe something that always strikes me and something that always inspires a lot of hope as well too is, so in the first day of class, I always ask, my students, what every professor asks their students, what are you doing here? Like, why are you here? Right. And it's funny, I come from a background of working with people who chose disasters as their profession, who kind of came into emergency management with a vision of what to do. And what I get from a lot of the students like yourselves are, I'm not, some of them have very clear goals within disaster management, but the vast majority will say, I don't know, but I know that disasters are a big part of what we're experiencing, of these consequences. I know that we need to know more. A lot of them have personal stories of family that have been affected, or they themselves had been affected. And what ends up happening is we have people coming into the classroom and then leaving the classroom from all different sectors of civil society, from different countries, different geographies, from the public sector, from the private sector, from nonprofits, and who then go work in those sectors. And these challenges that we face, you mentioned it in your description of the school as being inherently multidisciplinary. It's not a static point in time and space, right? It is an intersection of many different fields of study, and we get to sit at the middle of that intersection. And while that can be very challenging with the problems we have in front of us, it's very empowering because it means that we have access to solutions. And the students, all of you coming into the program, we don't have that kind of time, but I could go through just in this last semester the projects that we've had students engaged in that have helped us sort of crack the code on things by bringing in ideas that they had in an internship or a job they had someone else and collaborated with someone else. So this collaboration across multiple sectors, I think, is something that gives me a lot of hope and is really embodied in the charter and in the spirit of the climate school.
Thank you, Jeff. And finally, Radley, could you share kind of maybe a moment in your career that reaffirmed your commitment to studying climate?
Yeah, so thanks for the chance to speak to you all today. I think for me, the moments that sort of affirm my commitment are those opportunities to get outside of the ivory tower and see all the real world ways that climate extremes and historical climate variability just impact every facet of people's lives, right? And it's never, even with climate change, that you sort of solely take that information about how risks are changing and apply it in a top-down way. All the interactions with communities just reinforce that climate is one of many factors that's changing, along with other issues, injustices, changes in technology. So it's that ability to contribute sort of at that interface to the broader societal goals that people have that are being affected by a changing climate. And sometimes there are opportunities that are emerging too. So every time I go and have the chance to interact with a community anywhere, often with very different cultural backgrounds, it's that empathy that's formed when you get outside of the ivory tower and just remember how impactful this is at the most basic level. People's ability to have enough food for themselves, to be able to protect their children from, air quality, or just fears about really sort of catastrophic risks to their financial and otherwise sort of well-being and livelihood. So those interactions all just sort of reinforce emotionally how important this is. And then just quickly to say sort of what gives me hope, because in some ways, that story I just told can sound like a negative one, although at the base of it is people working under huge amounts of stress to improve their livelihood, often in a very communal way that makes things, better for others. But another thing that specifically sort of gives me hope, I guess, beyond that is the interactions with students at Columbia, right? I mean, sort of getting back to that idea of the top-down sort of model of the professor with all conveying all this wisdom. The reality, of course, is that as we're interacting with students, often young people, what's really happening is that we're often learning every bit as much as you are from us, right? So the latest understandings in communications, social media, what inspires, the latest innovations about green energy and using new technologies. I find often students from diverse background, often younger folks, just have that flexibility to sort of see these interconnections and a can-do attitude to jump in and sort of learn new technologies or new ways of interacting. So in my experience, students are often better than, say, faculty in the face of all these challenges, fears, risks, saying, well, let's find a piece to work on and contribute in whatever way we can to moving things forward, rather than sort of getting lost in a passive way in the scale of all these changes. So it's that feeling among young people that the motivation is still there, and these sort of new approaches and flexibility of thinking across disciplines, without question, is the thing that makes me think maybe in a nonlinear way we can stay ahead of these crises, even as the crises are happening, faster than we thought they would. Just look at the fires, going on underway in Southern California, for an example of how hard it is to sort of keep up. But with young people leading things, I think we can.
Thank you, Radley. And maybe now we can shift to more of an advanced certificate conversation. And I'll say let's start with Jess, because I'm always fascinated by the food system whenever Jess describes it. And the data points, the 1/3 of carbon release relates to food systems each year. I'm always fascinated by that, Jess. But why study food systems, disaster management, climate systems, analytics, and kind of what skills can you take away from them? So Jess, can we start with the food system?
Yeah, I mean, as Alfred said, food systems generate about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions. Food is the largest driver of methane emissions coming from livestock. Methane, a very toxic greenhouse gas. Largest contributor to biodiversity loss in plant and animals. Largest consumer of freshwater resources. So food systems, the way we produce food, the way we process it, package it, move it, consume it, is all having significant impacts on climate. So you can imagine, wow, okay, there's a lot we can do there. We can produce food differently. We can move it differently using renewable energy resources. We can better manage soils and water, and we can consume different kinds of foods. On the other side, climate is having big impacts on food systems, lots of shocks hitting food systems that, again, is impacting global food trade, the ability to move food around the world, food prices. We talked a lot of talk about food prices last year, part of the US political election situation. So it's both a victim of climate change, but an instigator of climate change. But within that is an array of solutions. So I think a person who decides to focus on food as a certificate, they will get a deep understanding of that relationship, that bi-directional relationship. They'll get very much involved in food politics. What does it mean? What do trade embargoes mean? What does it mean to take on multinational, transnational companies? How successful has that been? What does it mean to make choices every day at the market? So you'll learn a lot about how this global to very hyper-local food systems, how they work. And I would say, unfortunately, but fortunately, there's a lot of jobs in this space. Food systems are really, really difficult to transform. It requires a lot of political, social, cultural changes. So there'll be a lot of jobs because it's going to take a long time to fix food systems, as well as in the context of climate. So jobs can range from working in private sector all the way to the UN. There's 4 agencies that deal with food in the United Nations. We have a whole agriculture research system called the CGIAR. So there's just a lot of jobs in the food and climate space now. So it's not only an interesting certificate to learn a lot about a systems approach and how you can really shift an entire system that everyone interacts with every day. You make choices every day about what you buy and eat. But it's also an opportunity to really grow a new potential path of a career and employment in the food space. And I just want to add on, we are adding, we can talk about the food courses, if you want later, Alfred, or I can put them in the chat. But we are also going to be offering a couple of water courses. So they very much pair together, these food and water space, along with energy.
Excellent. Yeah. Thank you, Jess. Yeah. Feel free, anything in the chat that's helpful. That's much appreciated. Jeff, could you share with us a little bit more importance of disaster management and kind of what skills they're going to get out of this advanced certificate?
Yeah. It's it's funny, the field of disaster management kind of grew out of like first responder agencies and civil defense agencies and things like that. And this very sort of bureaucratized approach to kind of like managing a disaster. And I think what we found over the last several decades, really more than that, but what is sort of increasingly finding its way into policy and practice, is that the table is set for a disaster in all of these other spaces. So we have, there's a formula: risk equals the hazard times the vulnerability divided by the capacity to cope. And so essentially what this means is that there are sociological factors, right? People living in different neighborhoods in New York City experience Hurricane Sandy very, very differently, based on where they were relative to the flood, based on the resources that they had to marshal, the social connectedness that they had or didn't have with other folks. And so all of these policies, all of these things that we do in terms of building civil society, building schemas for how we finance things, how we develop, all kind of set the table for either building or diminishing resilience that then impact in the aftermath. I think within the climate space, this is becoming increasingly important. Even in just the last couple of years, we've seen it at COP, we've seen just in the last 2 years, climate adaptation really taking much more center stage, much more significant pledges, although still a long way to go, with a lot of financial firms sort of looking at climate adaptation, vulnerability of investments, and but also opportunities for investment, rethinking the math, looking at social justice and how that impacts the experiences. So again, I think one of the things that is so unique about this program is that it's not based in training you to be an emergency manager and all of the protocols and paperwork that goes with that, although we touch on that, but it's to give the skill sets on how do these different things come together. So in a variety of different career paths going back out into your careers, wherever that may be, you're better positioned for your role in helping to build this resilience and contribute to this resilience, as well as recognizing and working with and having some of the tools of working with other partners. Some of the courses we do, we start with a survey course. We have courses that specialize in research methods, the application. A lot of times we use mixed modalities in terms of our research methods, how you can sort of sniff out what's real and what's questionable. I use a different term, but I probably shouldn't swear on this. But also, and I should say too, throughout all of our courses, we design the assignments based on the work that we have to do every day. So in the survey course, one of the assignments we give is you come up with a resilience initiative, and you have to give 3 different value propositions to 3 different sectors within the community. So you have your reasons on why this is really important, but how do you convince, like, let's say a business owner or a chamber of commerce that this is in the interests of their constituents? How do you convince a homeowner? How do you convince a legislator? It's the same initiative, but the value, the benefits sought are a little bit different. So and this is based on work that we've had to do in some consulting arrangements. For our research methods course, you're essentially putting together a research protocol that would be part of that process that you would do to submit for an institutional review board that would actually oversee the research. So we try to link everything we do with how you would actually put this into practice as well too. And unfortunately, this is a growth space. With disasters, and even with what we hope to see is less disasters, because we hope to see more investment in adaptation and climate resilience, but it's a similar skill set that's needed for both the management and the prevention of disasters.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you. And then Radley, if we could touch on a little bit more about the importance of climate systems and analytics, and kind of what skill sets a student's going to get out of that advanced certificate.
Great, thanks, Alfred. Yeah, I would say that you're going to go deeper in the certificate in terms of quantification, risk assessment, spatial mapping, going under the hood on various types of models, whether they're climate models, whether they're downscaled to high spatial resolution, whether they're impact assessment models that go sector by sector, whether they're financial models. So really, this is a chance to go deeper through those core courses, if you will, in the certificate, which are around risk assessment, around climate modeling, around advanced quantitative computing methods in Python, and around GIS. And then through those other selectives, you could take things, as we saw earlier, like complex climate risk, cascading effects across sectors. So those courses will equip you in many ways if you want to focus on adaptation, resilience, justice, emissions reduction, or go into a more traditional sector that's going to be affected by the various aspects of climate change. But, I think there's a subcomponent of the students who might go specialize. They might decide that they want to work for a consulting company that wants to do risk assessment, or work for a government lab. Who knows? I think there's also going to be a group of students that, ultimately won't necessarily be providing that information, but will have developed that critical lens to sort of, when someone is pitching a product, say to them, say you're working for a city government or working for an NGO, somebody comes along and says, I got the latest and greatest product that's going to answer all your questions. You'll have that critical lens to start to be able to say, not just which products maybe are over-promising given the key uncertainties, but which products and which types of information, which types of collaborations are sort of fit to purpose, and most able to match people's needs. So obviously it's a very diverse set, but I think it's most fundamentally sort of a blend of that information providing in a very quantitative way, but also developing that broader skill set to sort of assess and make critical decisions, for example, in a policy space, with a deeper understanding of the limitations and strengths of existing quantitative and qualitative tools.
Thank you so much, Radley. Now I think I would like to transition to the questions coming into the Q&A, which is great. One of the questions is, are there any prerequisites for the Climate Systems Analytics certificate course? Or can anyone apply? So this first year, one thing we noted, there's no STEM requirement. There is a unique set of questions on all the MS applications relating to historical quantitative coursework with which you have completed. Having a quantitative foundation is going to be important, but we don't have any specific prerequisites to outline at this time. If you wanted, feel free, if you're still unsure about kind of your candidacy or the best fit, feel free to schedule a one-on-one appointment with me and we can have a more robust conversation. But what I want to emphasize is, let's say let's say you were an economics major, you might not have, or let me even say a political science major, you still might be a good fit for climate systems analytics as long as you had some evidence of quantitative work in your undergraduate experience. Another question came in about pursuing a PhD after completing the MS. And since the program focuses on advanced certificates rather than a thesis paperwork, so that's correct, this is a professional degree, would it be possible to engage in research work with faculty members or join labs to gain hands-on field research experience? Are there opportunities with Columbia Climate School or Columbia University to collaborate? You're asking the right people. So maybe should we begin with Jeff? Would you want to take it? I know NCTP has been on fire. I mean, really in a good way with a lot of students that you guys hired. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's worth noting that, in any given year, we probably have about a dozen or more students sort of working directly with us on projects. Now, the National Center for Disaster Preparedness is one of the affiliate centers of it's one of the centers of the climate school, but it's soft money funded. And so what that means is that we are out there pursuing grants and contracts for the work that we do. So I know there was an element of one of the questions in terms of what is available. So we draw students from two ways. One is we have projects that come up and we say, oh, we need help. We need smart people to help us with this. And so we put a call out there to students and we bring some on board, and that can happen at the beginning of the semester. It could happen in the middle of the semester. And at other times we'll be able to integrate students sort of through the internship program, which is more of a structured sort of cycle. But yeah, so we've had students ranging on working with us on curriculum development for training programs for the Federal Emergency Management Agency. We're working on an index for climate adaptation finance for the Rockefeller Foundation. We have a couple of students working with us on that. We have an Earth network that's focused on developing case studies for disaster management, like you might use as cases in a business school. And so it's a wide range of sort of analytical or applied, and always really sort of directly kind of in service to actors in the field, in the professional practice spaces or the policy spaces. And so I'd encourage folks too to take full advantage of the internship programs and the GRA, the Graduate Research Assistant and Department Research Assistant programs available through the Climate School, but also to reach out to the departments directly, because they could have funding that is not on the same cycle or that sort of comes up in the middle of the semester, and to stay kind of front of mind in those conversations, because there's a lot of just really, really cool opportunities that come up in a structured way and organically.
if anybody, that was very robust. Thank you, Jeff. If anybody else wants to chime in, I know that students have done research with Jess definitively. Yes.
Yeah, we always have students working on different research projects with us on my team. But I wanted to also say I lead something called the Food for Humanity Initiative, which is an action collaborative. And Radley and Jeff lead two of these action collaboratives. And this is really, the Food for Humanity is bringing together everyone across the university who works on food research and teaching. And the climate school is meant to curate and host this Food for Humanity group. And I would say that one of the nice things for students is you can get involved in this Food for Humanity initiative. We have lots of different interesting events and activities going on, but it's also a way for students to engage with different faculty across the entire university who are looking for research assistantships, teaching assistantships. So it connects you with all the faculty who have really interesting food related projects and are hiring on that. So that's another opportunity so it's not only working with me and my team who work on food at the climate school, but a broader group of people who are engaging on food and climate across the entire university.
Excellent. My apologies. So another question that came in, and I think Professor Horton, this could be a good one. Is it climate risk analytics certificate primarily focused on risk assessment?
So I would say that it's broader. Certainly would anticipate that a lot of folks will go into that hazard risk assessment and maybe focus on adaptation and resilience. But for sure, going through that certificate, you'd be very well suited as well to go more deep into emissions reduction, sort of accounting of various types of emissions across sectors. Financial modeling on the emissions side, for example. And as I sort of alluded to earlier, someone who wanted to really hone in on questions around environmental justice, for example, could easily do so coming out of this certificate. So if it sort of depends on what we see over time from student need. If I had to guess, the kind of climate risk hazard disclosure towards resilience and adaptation might be the sort of component that had more people and more focus than any other component. But, I think there'll be plenty of other things that'll be central, whether they're emissions reduction, whether they're justice focused, whether it's something, that we're doing through the water collaborative, for example, around water quality, microplastics, forever chemicals, right? All these things are connected. So I think it would be too reductionist to say that it's mostly going to be about climate risk.
Thank you, Radley. I just saw one question come in that I want to answer very quickly. Can I apply to both programs? Unfortunately, no. You have to select the program with which you feel is the best fit and apply to that program, whether it is the topic of today, the MS in Climate, or alternatively, our MA program. Another question is, for your respective fields, what are the emerging challenges and how might the MS in Climate students be given the opportunity to explore or tackle those challenges? Interesting, broad question. Anybody want to go for it?
I'll jump in a little bit. I like to call I call this, in my mind at least, I don't know if I've ever said this out loud, but in disaster management, I call it the public health problem. I say this as an MPH. I have a master's in public health. And the public health problem is that you start peeling back the layers on or zooming out in terms of what impacts health, and everything impacts health, right? Where we live, how we live, air quality, access to nutrition, all of these things. And disaster management is very similar, right? We have agencies that are built to manage disasters based on like a fire model of put the fire out, rebuild the structure, but then we have to take a look at what leads to vulnerability, what creates it. But again, I'll flip that on its head too. It's an incredible opportunity as we're realizing this more and more. Policymakers, people in the field, in the public sector and the private sector are looking to have a more three-dimensional understanding of disasters. And so we have a number of initiatives in addition to the design of this program, but also in our action collaboratives, which we haven't talked about today, and some of our Earth networks and some of our other programs to also help build out what does that sort of disaster ecosystem look like. And in understanding that, we can have better influence. It's not just about putting the fire out. It's about preventing it in the first place. It's about giving people better tools to sort of recognize and recognizing the value of things like social connectedness, social cohesion, social justice in these responses. So it's complex. Our understanding of the problems are more complex than they've ever been, but our access to data and expertise is also greater than it's ever been. So we are rising to the challenge.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. One other question that came in I can definitely tackle is why have you chosen specifically the MS in Architecture and Urban Design program to combine it with the MS in Climate? Are there other programs? So climate in the built environment is also critical when you're looking at climate. And one thing to note is that it's a collaborative environment here at Columbia University. So we're actually hoping to announce another dual degree program in the very near future. I probably shouldn't be previewing it to this nature, but we're hoping it's with the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences. So stay tuned for that. And then another question about climate finance. We have many now climate finance electives being offered at Columbia Climate School. So you could still take electives in climate finance and complement it with your MS in climate degree, certainly. And this is a quantitative degree. I could certainly see there's no reason why a student couldn't work in the climate finance space by pursuing the MS in climate. Although these advanced certificates are a little bit more specialized, but does anybody have a take on that or a perspective?
We do a lot of work with the finance sector. We're doing
Chris.
some work, especially in our executive education programs, but within our center. So some of the indices we're developing are increasingly financially focused. And I believe we have a number of students, you and Damaris would know better than me, but I believe we have a number of students who actually, I know we have many who come in from the finance side and who also kind of go back into some aspect of financing, whether that's directly at the private sector firm or in some of the multilaterals like the World Bank and things like that. So there's some pretty strong connections and some pretty strong faculty here that we have, Lisa Sachs and others who, Bruce Usher from the business school. So we have some pretty strong partnerships as well too.
Excellent. Well, I went over time, and I apologize to my professors, but they're phenomenal. And I just want to say thank you so much, Radley, Jess, and Jeff. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. To all the prospective students and applicants, if fall 2025 is what you're interested in, I really encourage you to move forward with an admissions application and take advantage of that January 15th priority deadline. And if you do have any questions, again, Damaris went ahead and shared several of those links. Feel free to open them now, start taking a look. And again, have a wonderful rest of the week, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. That's what I always emphasize, continuation of a conversation. All right, take care, everybody. Bye.